Hello everyone. So today we are going to discuss the rest of the part of Act 3 Scene 2 Merchant of Venice. I know this scene is a quite long one, but we have to make it interesting and we have to make it understandable because this is the most important scene of the book, and this is also considered to be the climax scene which we have discussed in the previous slides. Okay, so here in the previous one what we have discussed, so let us refresh that. So in the previous slide or in the previous PPT we have discussed about how the outward appearances can be deceptive, and Bassanio gets ready to go into the cascade room, and he has started to see the cascades and judge whether which one is right or which one is wrong. And while he was going to the cascade room, a group of musicians played a song, and the moral of the song was never go or never attract yourself towards the outward appearances because they attract you, but they also have some ugly truth behind them. Okay, so we have to be careful about that in every field. Okay, so after the song, when Bassanio comes in front of the three cascades, he describes or he explains how the outward appearances can be deceptive. Okay, by certain examples. So he told about the first example regarding the lawyer, then the second example regarding religion, and the third example related to cowards. Okay, so how they hide their unattractive thing or that ugly truth inside them by pleasing voice or pleasing appearance of outer side. Okay, so we have discussed about that and how the livers of the coward are white as milk, and they try to compare themselves to Hercules and Mars, who are referred to the man of strength, manliness, and bravery. Clear? And we have also discussed how the women who try to beautify themselves by the cosmetics they buy, so how much cosmetics they apply on their beauty, that much they are lighter in their characters. So we have discussed till that. So let us now resume the other part of the story or the play. Let us see now. Thus ornament is but the gilded shore to a most dangerous sea, the beauteous scarf veiling an Indian beauty, in a word, the seeming truth which cunning times put on to entrap the wisest. So here from the beginning Bassanio tries to say that outward adornment or outward appearances is always deceptive. So here he is comparing two things. So this outward beauty is like the attractive but treacherous or dangerous seashore which is leading people or which is attracting people towards it, and once they are attracted or coming towards it, it captivates them forever, so they fall in a false trap of this outward appearance. So here, as a treacherous sea which is having high waves, and when a boat or a man goes attracted towards a wave, it is captivated by the waves, and the result is his death. Likewise, here also this beauty is like this treacherous sea who has laid a trap, and when these wisest people get attracted to this beauty, they get into trouble. Okay, this is one reference, and the second reference he has given that it is also like a lovely veil. Veil means a covering. Okay, lovely veil which hides the dark face of an Indian beauty. So here the Indian beauty is not our India as we are comparing to, but in the 16th century, while by the in the Elizabethan period, the Elizabethans thought of the people of the West Indies as Indians. Okay, so the black beauty which we say, so thought that the people of the West Indies are as Indian. So the beautiful scarf which was covering the dark skin of the Indian beauty, it was not considered to be beautiful. So that was not the definition of beauty, as Elizabethans were white skinned, so they thought this white skinned girls or white skinned women are also always considered as beautiful, but the dark skinned people were not given that much importance. So here This Indian beauty is considered as a false outward appearances which they try to cover with this beautiful veil or beautiful covering. And once this wisest people by seeing the colorful veil only get attracted towards them, and when this veil is uncovered they see the Indian beauty which is not considered or was not acceptable in the Elizabethan period. Okay, so here two references you have understood. First one is it is considered or compared to a dangerous sea which is attracting or trapping the wisest men in its beauty, and other is it is like an Indian beauty which is covering her face with the beautiful scarf and she is trapping people. Clear? Therefore then, thou gaudy gold, hard food for Midas, I will none of thee, nor none of thee, thou pale and common drudge between man and man. But thou, meagre lead, which rather threatenest than dost promise aught, thy paleness moves me more than eloquence, and here I choose, I. Joy be the consequence. So now he is giving his justification why he does not want to choose golden casket, why he does not want to choose a silver one, and why he wants to choose the lead one. Okay, so here he is trying to say first, therefore then thou gaudy gold, hard food for Midas. So before going further, let us discuss who was Midas. So Midas was a very wealthy king. Okay, but though he had so much amount of wealth, he had so much amount of gold, he was very much greedy for more and more. Okay, so he foolishly asked that all things which he touched should be turned into gold, and the request was granted. Okay, but as even the food and drink which he touched turned to gold. Okay, so he implored that please God to take his favor back. Thus, the god did, realizing that King Midas confirmed or he understood what blunder he had taken upon, because when he touched the food and drink, it turned into gold. And lastly, he loved his daughter very much. And at last, when he touched his daughter also turned into gold, which made him realize his mistake. So here the phrase that is hard food for Midas refers to the solid food which King Midas could not eat as it was touched by him and it was turned into solid gold. So having so much wealth also, it was of no use for King Midas. So that is why it is considered to be hard food. So though he had so much of gold, it was of no use for him. So as a result, it will be no use for me also. So now my decision is I am not going for the golden casket. Now he says, nor none of thee, thou pale and common drudge. Okay, so now he also says that I do not want silver, because he considered it as a very much common metal or that much boring metal which is used as a slave in business transaction. So in the Elizabethan period, that time transactions or the business formats were changing of coins, and this that was a pattern of business at that time. So silver was nothing, just an exchange commodity between two people. So he said, I don't want a slave, or I don't want which is very much common. So that is why I am denying the silver casket also. Okay. Then he says, but thou, meagre lead. So the word meagre refers to pale, dull appearance of lead. And why he says that? Which rather threatenest than dost promise aught, thy paleness moves me more than eloquence, and here choose I. Joy be the consequence. So here he is trying to say that I want to choose the leaden casket because it makes no pretensions. It does not pretend anything. It is ugly, so it is pretending to be ugly itself. So it may possess some real worth which will be beneficial for me. Okay. And its dull look is attracting me more, and it is uh, protesting that something I will take from you. It is not telling that I will give you more and more, but it is admitting the fact that I will take all your things which are good in your life. Because according to the lead inscription, what was there? Who chooseth me must give and hazard all his hath. Okay, all he hath, everything will be taken by the leaden casket. And what he had, what Bassanio had at the correct moment, he had the true love of Portia. So at that time he was ready to give everything away because he had that much belief on his love. That is why he played for leaden casket. Okay, and now that decision of choosing the leaden casket was not done by the head, but it was done by the heart which is full of love. So joy be the consequence. So at last he says, now my final decision is the leaden casket, and whatever the consequence may be, I am ready to face that. Understood? Then Portia, when she was seeing Bassanio making a decision, what she was thinking, you see, how all the other passion fleet to air, as doubtful thoughts and rash embraced despair, and shuddering fear and green-eyed jealousy. O love, be moderate, allay thy ecstasy, in measure reign thy joy, scant this excess. I feel too much thy blessing, make it less, for fear I surfeit. Okay, so here now she is telling, after seeing, because she somehow knows which is the right casket, and when Bassanio chooses the correct casket, she is feeling very much lighter. And why lighter? She says how all other passions flee to air, means whatever emotions altogether, that means fear, anxiety, doubt, stress, jealousy, restlessness, every emotion which was there inside her heart, now it is flying into air, and she is feeling very much lighter at this moment. Okay, so that time Portia went gives an outburst of relief, that how her anxiety, her despair, her fear and jealousy are flying into air, which have been agitating her for so long. Till now she was very much in terror and fear that if Bassanio will not be able to choose the correct casket, what will be the consequence? I can never meet Bassanio again in the whole of my life. What I will do, because I really love him. So these all things were going on in her mind, which was very much disturbing and distracting her. But now all that emotions, that is despair, uncertainty, fear, panic, everything is going or flying into the air. And now what is left behind in her heart? That is love and happiness. And then also, when she is so much lighter and she is so much happy, now she is trying to figure out that, oh love, now she is trying to pray to the God of love, be moderate. Be moderate means give me a exact amount of love which is required at this moment only. Don't shower on me the whole lot of love, because I fear if I get more, then something bad may happen. So measure it in a proper way, scant the excess. So the excess love which you are giving me, scant it or keep it aside, and in measurable showering you bless me with your love, because make it less, for fear I surfeit. So it may prove too much for her. That is why she is asking that give me only the perfect bliss at this moment, how much I deserve, not more than that and not less than that. And here you see, students, one different term is there, that is green-eyed jealousy. Okay, so in the previous scene in Act 1, you would have remembered that a conversation was going on when one person or one character told about jaundice. Jaundice, the color is yellow, and that yellow color is of jealousy. So every emotion is referred with one color. Clear? So here also jealousy, that is a kind of emotion, is considered to be the color green, and here this green-eyed jealousy is of whom? A green-eyed monster. So on the right hand side I have given it. Jealousy is personified here. It is often called a monster with green eyes, and Portia uses this phrase to justify her anxiety that led to her fear for Bassanio if he loses the casket. what would happen in future and how she will be dealing with the other circumstances which will be coming into her life. Okay, so this green-eyed jealousy is a color of the emotion, and it is personified over here as a green-eyed monster. Clear? Bassanio. Now Bassanio is opening the leaden casket and he is telling, what I find here you see. Fair Portia, counterfeit. So what he finds? He finds Portia's portrait over there. What demigod hath come so near creation? Move these eyes, whether riding on the balls of mine. Seem they in motion? Here are severed lips, parted with sugar breath. So sweet a bar should sunder such sweet friends. Here in her hairs the painter plays the spider, and hath woven a golden mesh entrap the hearts of men faster than gnats in cobwebs. So this is very much important while he is describing or he is explaining the beauty of Portia's portrait which he found in the leaden casket. So first of all, three times or three parts he is beautifying about Portia's portrait. And first of all, he says, what demigod? So he is denoting the painter as demigod, or he is half divine person who has that much of power to paint such a picture which is so much alive, which is so much real. Okay, and it is not an work of any human painter. So it is a half divine person who has made such a beautiful portrait of Portia. It is seeming like it is very much alive. Clear? So demigod means half divine god or a half divine person. Now he questions that, does this eye seem to move? Because it is so lively, it is seeming that the eyes are moving in the portrait itself. Okay, so he is telling, or he is now and making himself understand that it might not be the case, and as it is looking so much lively and my own eyeballs are so much attracted to that image, so it might be as my eyeballs are moving, the eyes in the portrait also are following it. Okay, so first he thinks that the eyes are really moving, and as the portrait is very much alive, so the eyes have got that much of life in it. But after that he understands himself that as his eyeballs are so much attracted or pointed on the portrait, so it might seem the eyes of Portia in the portrait seems to be lively. Okay, so whether riding on the balls of mine, seem they in motion. So my balls are moving so fast, that is why her eyes in the portrait is seeming in motion. So that was the first clarification he gives about beautiful eyes of Portia in the portrait. Then comes her lips. Here are severed lips. Severed lips means parted from each other. The upper lip and the lower lip are parted from each other a little. Okay. So when he sees her lips in the portrait, he is telling why these two lips have parted from each other. Only one reason is there of the parting, that is the sugary breath or the sweet breath which flows from the mouth. Okay, so sweet a bar. So this breath, this sugary breath or sweet breath, is such a so sweet that it is creating a bar. It is dividing these two friends. So the upper lip and the lower lip are considered to be friends, which never get apart from one another. But here the sweet breath which is flowing from Portia's mouth, that is only the one reason which is parting these two sweet friends, that is the upper lip and the lower lip of Portia. Clear? Then comes to her hairs. So here in her hair the painter placed the spider, and hath woven a golden mesh entrap the hearts of men faster than gnats in the cobweb. Okay, so now when he is describing her hair, he says that the artist has portrayed Portia's sunny or golden locks of hair in such a beautifying manner that it is depicting as if it is a cobweb of a spider. And as you know, in the cobweb some insects go and entrap themselves when they pass through the cobweb. It is a web which is made to trap the insects. Okay, so likewise, as in the cobweb of a spider, insects are getting entrapped. Likewise, in the cobweb, which is considered to be the hair of Portia, in that web, in that golden web, what is entrapped? The hearts of men who see Portia, or of how beautiful she is. So she captures their hearts into the golden web, okay, of her hair. Clear? So here you see three references are there. First one is her eyes, second one is her lips, and the third one is her hair. And see in the right hand side I have given lastly, the hair has kept in mind the cobweb of a spider. Portia's sunny locks are like cobwebs which trap the hearts of men sooner by her beauty than compared to spider's web which trap insects. So the speed of entrapping, if we consider the speed of a spider entrapping the insects and the golden cobweb of Portia entrapping the hearts of men, so this golden cobweb is way much faster as compared to the normal spider. Clear? Then, but her eyes, how could he see to do them? Having made one, methinks it should have power to steal both his, and leave itself unfurnished. Yet look, how far the substance of my praise doth wrong this shadow in underprizing it, so far this shadow doth limp behind the substance. So now he comes again to the caricature or the portrait which is made, and he focuses on the eyes of Portia, and he says that Bassanio prays in the eyes, lips, and hair, but he is thinking that her eyes are so much beautiful and it is so much dazzled. Okay, it is so much attractive and it is dazzling with light that when the painter must have painted the first eye, he got so much blind or attracted by the dazzling light of one eye that he might not have that much of courage to paint the second eye, and he would have left the portrait unfurnished or incomplete. But yet, look how far I am telling or I am praising so much. But how I wonder that the artist was successful in painting both the Portia's eyes. Okay, when he himself might have lost both of his eyes. Because the eyes of Portia are so much dazzling or so much brightened that while drawing one eye only, he would have turned blind. And how he would have completed the picture by drawing another eye. But here, as two eyes are present, I assume that in painting both the eyes of Portia, he himself, the painter, must have been turned blind. Clear? Now he says, when I'm praising Portia so much, he concludes by saying that the portrait falls as far short of the living Portia in beauty. Though so much I'm praising the portrait, but when I compare this portrait of Portia to the live Portia in front of me, this portrait is nothing as compared to the worth of the live Portia who is standing in front of me. And I am underpricing, means I am having short of words. I'm not able to express myself more, and in that unexpressed way, I am keeping down. Okay, I'm not that much well enough to appreciate this picture as well as the lively Portia which is standing in front of me. Okay, so now I am lagging behind in praising and I am falling short of true merits of this lovely portrait. Okay, now he goes to the scroll. What is written? So Portia's portrait is there attached with the scroll over there. So now the continent and summary of my fortune. So the continent means where the scroll is kept, and what is written over that scroll, what is the summary of him. He is reading, you that choose not by the view, chance as fair and choose as true, since this fortune falls to you, be content and seek no new. If you be well pleased with this, and hold your fortune for your bliss, turn you where your lady is, and claim her with a loving kiss. So you see how much rhyming each and every sentence is in that scroll. So in the scroll, what is written, you see that as Bassanio has not chosen this casket by the mere outward appearances, so he should feel himself that much fortunate enough that he has chosen this casket very wisely using his heart. And since this fortune has fallen on him, this fortune is supporting him now, he should be satisfied with what he has got, and he should seek no more, means he should not be greedy anymore, or he should be seeking much more what he is getting to. Okay, and if he will be satisfied with what he has, then he will be the most happiest person in the world. Okay, and if he is well pleased with his luck or the favor which he has got, and feels that the fate has brought him happiness, then he should go to his lady and claim her as his own with a kiss of love. Understood? So he is trying to understand the scroll, and the scroll says that you have taken a wise decision using your heart, and be contented with what you have now. Never be that much greedy, and if you are very much honored by the fortune which has fallen on you, so you should be very much happier person in the world. And now if you are satisfied, then turn towards your lady and seek her love. Clear? So this is the scroll which has been written. Clear? So now let us conclude over here. The rest of the act let us see or discuss in the next class. Thank you.